So today I want to talk about what is a starseed. So a starseed is a person whose soul's origin is from a different star system. So the theory is that after World War II, when the atomic bombs were dropped, there were beings on other star systems, planets, that were watching over the Earth, and they were very concerned about what was happening on the Earth because that would have ramifications outside of this Earth, but also where was the Earth heading with this. So there is the prime directive, which is the law of non interference, which is the extraterrestrials cannot come to the Earth and interfere. But what they did instead was they found kind of a workaround and said, okay, we're going to ask for volunteers. So these are beings from, whose origins are from other star systems to volunteer to come to Earth. And so they incarnated as humans, but their origin was from the stars. So that is the theory. And this is what I'm referencing. This is The Three Waves of Volunteers and the New Earth by Dolores Cannon. And I have no idea how this ends up happening, but when my awakening started happen, I just happened to come across Dolores Cannon's work on YouTube. And then eventually I ended up going to a retreat in Sedona, and I met my soul tribe at that time. And I remember talking to them, and they also knew about Dolores Cannon. And so I just find it curious how a lot of us starseeds end up coming across this information. And so it really helps us to understand what's happening and, what we're going through. So if you're interested, I really recommend that book to help kind of orient you on, this basic idea of why we're here. And so, one other thing that is something that I'm still trying to understand is the different, like how many people on Earth are actually star seeds. So, when I first started learning about star seeds, I heard a few different theories, and I'm hearing different ones now. So I heard that most people on Earth are star seeds, and there's very few Earth origin souls that are here on Earth. And then I also heard that most people on Earth are star seeds, but they're not truly star seeds until they wake up and remember who they are. And I do think that most star seeds do come to Earth with a plan that they are going to wake up and remember, because even though we agreed to come to Earth and to help raise the vibration of this planet, we do come in with a veil of amnesia. So there is risk for us coming in and then getting caught on the karmic wheel, karmic cycle, like most Earth-based souls do. But we agreed to come here, and once we wake up and start remembering, then we can, get on with our mission. And then the other theory I've heard is that there are only several million star seeds. I can't remember the number, if it was like 500 million or something. And so I've heard different theories as to, how many different star seeds are on here. Um, at this point, I can't say that I have an idea one way or the other. I don't think it really matters ultimately, but just to let you know that there are different perspectives out there. As far as what are the signs that somebody may be a star seed, I thought I would share with you some of the examples. I think the biggest one is that people that are star seeds just don't feel like they belong here. It's kind of like you're always kind of just confused. You maybe feel like you don't belong. Maybe feel like the black sheep of the family sometimes. A lot of people feel like they just don't get it. Like, what's the point of this life? They're just kind of, confused. I think a lot of people in the younger generation that are here to kind of disrupt the systems, they're really the ones that are pushing this whole, status quo about go get a job, go work, and go retire. I mean, they're really pushing that story. And so I think that's one of the roles of some of those star seeds. Another sign is that you're drawn to the stars. I think a lot of us have just always just been, curious. If we get a chance, we're out there just staring out the sky and we don't know why, but we just, are drawn to it. A big one is being sensitive to your environment, and it can be, sensitive to foods. It can be sensitive to being around a lot of different people, being very sensitive to loud noises, and just being sensitive in general. I think that where our nervous systems are just a little bit, wired a little differently. And then what also goes along with that is also, I think, needing to be alone a lot. And you also may just feel older than your age. I think that's also a big one. And one other one is that a lot of people probably will notice that you feel just calmer around certain people. And I think that's a good sign. And then, as far as the different roles that starseeds may play, I don't really focus so much on this one. I think we all have a different role. I don't think it's that as important to kind of map that out. But some roles you may hear are grid worker, and then probably, like, I think a lot of people, you may have heard of the indigos. They're kind of like this system disruptor. They're kind of breaking the way that things have always been and challenging those. And then I think a lot of people are here just to anchor the light. I think, we just by shining our light and, focusing on the positive, I think we're helping bring the light and the positive energy to those around us. And then I think some people are here, they're kind of transmuting negative energy. I think a lot of people, especially when they're just starting to wake up, they don't realize how sensitive they have been their entire lives to energy. I know that was the case for me. I felt like I was constantly drained all the time. And, it wasn't until I woke up and started understanding more about energy and learning how to manage it that I was able to, start understanding it better. And then, putting safeguards in place, or establishing boundaries, or even changing my routine so that I could help my energy so that it wouldn't get as run down. And then, as far as the different star systems that star seeds may be from, you may have heard people talk about Pleiades, Sirius, Arcturus, and then Lyra or Lyran, and then Andromeda, and then of course reptilians. So those are just the more common starseed type origins that you'll hear about. When I was first starting to wake up, I think this is an area of interest for a lot of people, because you're like, well, what am I? I want to know. And so I ended up doing a psychic reading with someone, and she told me that my origin was Lyra, that I am a Lyran, and that she said that specifically that I was a Hyadian Lyran. And she told me that the beings in the movie Avatar is what the Hyadian Lyrans look like. So I thought that was fascinating, because I really love that show, and I know a lot of people do. And I also think it's interesting how there's so much that's out in movies that you find out later is actually, revealing something. So I always thought that was curious. Now I don't know, I mean, I have had some experiences where I think I've been communicated through Lyrans. I've had at least one dream. I've had some kind of communication, through clairaudience, and I've had some dreams with different lion beings and visions with lion beings. So that resonates with me. But the thing that you have to understand is that even though we may have a certain origin, our soul may have originated in a certain star system. We've incarnated hundreds, if not thousands, of times. And so we have also, had lifetimes in maybe Andromeda or Pleiades. and also Earth. And, a lot of people are also, have incarnated into Lemuria and Atlantis, which is a whole nother topic. So there's all sorts of different scenarios, but that's basically the kind of gist of what a starseed is. I know that it can be very overwhelming when you start to wake up. So make sure to subscribe for more videos on this topic and more. Thanks.